Well, thank you, Susan. Thank you, President Alexander. Thank you all for having me here today. There's a lot of friends in the audience, a lot of people that I've worked on different projects with, but I'm excited to have a chance to talk to you today about how together we can advance Louisville as a more competitive city. So, the question, how do we ensure that Greater Louisville is in fact greater? Greater than, that we're building a community that, for our future, that's one that ensures opportunity for all? How do we really drive strategic change at the community level? We start at the same place. You start with your own life or business. How many of you set goals for yourself every day? Turn it on. Oh, turn it on. Well, that's great. There we go, Debbie. Thank you. So how many of you set a goal or are going to run the mini marathon this year? Or the marathon? Or triathlon? All right, so here's a better question then. How many of you set goals for your business every day, every year? New customers, increased profits. So to achieve those goals, you must regularly monitor and track your progress. Using research and analysis is an important and common tool in business. Using research and data analysis to affect community change and progress is equally effective and increasingly important in community change work. So what I want to share with you is a little bit from somebody who's making change in communities all around the world through his foundation, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation.
Measurement requires an intense focus, but it can make a huge difference. Foreign aid is more impactful today than ever before. We adopt programs that we can actually measure whether or not they're working. Are we getting the bed nets out? Are people getting the ARV medicines? Is the farmer's productivity going up? Well, in the case of polio, you want to go back and see, did the campaign get 90% of the children? Okay, which vaccination teams did their job, which did not? You can constantly see, where are you making mistakes? What do you need to change? So in contrast to several decades ago, where it was equally well-meaning, now it's more like a business where you know the numbers, you often see what you have to adjust, and that's letting us make huge progress. It'd be a shame if those resources were reduced at a time when they really are making such a huge difference. I'd love to have you read my annual letter, and if possible, give me feedback.
So I know that Rotary Club International has been very involved in the fight against polio, and what Bill Gates is telling us is that by tracking that progress and paying attention, the work that you all are doing is becoming more effective. And I know that sometimes when we think about these really big strategic challenges for a community, they seem big. How can we possibly make real fundamental change at such a huge level? So there's one more example I'm going to share with you, and it's about the work that UNICEF did in the 80s. They set an ambitious goal of getting life-saving vaccines to 80% of the children worldwide. And at that time, only 17% of the children were receiving vaccinations. UNICEF created a robust data gathering system to drive change. They could see where countries were successful and where others were falling behind. They were able to focus attention on the problem and make changes as needed. Because of those efforts, percent of infants worldwide that received necessary vaccinations rose from just 17% in 1980 to 75% in 1990. I'm going to say that again, 17% to 75% in just 20 years. That's big change, and it happens by using the information, the data that we have, and increase collective action. So let's talk about how we use that kind of change, that kind of strategic measurement to improve what we have here in Louisville. So at the Greater Louisville Project, we're focused on leveraging research and data to become a catalyst for civic action. Our mission is to use this research and data to engage the community in a shared agenda for progress. We really want to identify the greatest challenges and opportunities. We want to highlight the points of strategic disruption. We want to use this to help inform our policymakers and program investment. Ultimately, we want to inspire creative thinking and collective action on these challenges. So what is the Greater Louisville Project? Susan introduced it to you today. And thank you all to our funders, and Carl, you here, and Susan as leaders of this, and have been involved in this from the beginning. Many of you are familiar with the 2002 Brookings Institute report that Susan mentioned. And in that, around the time of city-county merger, 6 areas of focus were identified. From primary and post-secondary education to economic development and balancing metropolitan growth. And since that time, GLP has honed in on 3 areas of focus, or what we call deep drivers of change. Those deep drivers of change are educational attainment, creating quality jobs, and quality of life. Those then inform our civic agenda by highlighting the possibility and challenges facing Louisville. Annually, the Greater Louisville Project produces the Competitive City Report. They're on an annual basis. We measure ourselves against 14 peer cities. And it's really important to continue to measure our progress in a national competitive environment. It helps us benchmark our own progress and the progress of others. And it kind of gets our competitive juices flowing too. You all have in front of you the 2012 update report. In the back, I also have 2011, which is a report on the past and the previous decade as well. So we want you all to use these as a tool in your work as community leaders. But where I'm going to start is with the first deep driver of change, education. So the education deep driver calls for raising Louisville's persistently low levels of educational attainment with a primary goal to increase working age adults with a bachelor's degree or higher to 40%. And while we've highlighted bachelor's degrees, implicit in that are things such as reduction in high school dropouts, improvement in college preparation, improved access to and quality of early childhood development. So this is one of the success stories that we look to, bringing this data together over a number of years, then co-convening with the mayor's roundtable on education, and out of the work of that group, the creation of 55,000 degrees. Today, the 55,000 degrees is driving innovative programs and initiatives to meet this really big, audacious goal of 55,000 new degrees by 2020. I want to say thank you to the Rotary Club for your leadership in this initiative by creating the Rotary Promise Scholarship with Western High School. There are other community organizations who have collaborated around these same goals as well. A couple of years ago, Bingham Fellows was looking at how do we engage parents in education. The latest series out of WFPL and Donovan's team there is looking at the next Louisville and the state of public education supported by the Community Foundation and JP Morgan Chase Foundation. So really, Louisville has forged unprecedented community collaborations from across the public, private, educational, and nonprofit sectors, and really made a bold commitment to raise educational attainment. But we'll take all of us working towards that to make that happen. So where else can we have that kind of collective action? If we look deeper into education, I want to show you where we are now and where we've come from. So in the red bar in the middle of that shows us that right now we're at about 33% of working age adults. We define that as 25 to 64 with a bachelor's degree or higher. That's about middle of the pack. We need to move up to the top tier to be at the 40%. That's where we want and need to be, can aspire to be competitively. But it's important to understand that although we're at 33% now, which is solidly in the middle of the pack, in 1990 we were at 22%. So we've continued to make progress. While it's important to recognize and celebrate that progress, we all know we must do more. So this is a chart that shows us first. So we get really excited when we can say we're first, and in a comparison, especially against these peer cities, which we look at ourselves every day. This is really in the percentage increase over the last 10 years in young adults with a bachelor's degree or higher. For the first time, Louisville produced and/or attracted similar numbers of educated young adults as perennial top-tier cities, Charlotte and Columbus. So many of you may have seen the study out of Portland State University released last fall that again ranked Louisville #1 at attracting and retaining young educated adults, comparing us against not just these peer cities, but against some of the 50 largest U.S. metros. That was between 2008 and 2010. It's a first. And we feel really good about that. It doesn't mean we're not without challenges, of course. Even though we've had the highest rate of improvement among peers in the percentage of young adults with degrees, the fact remains clouded by the persistent gap in college attainment rates by race and ethnicity. So if you look at the second bar from the left, that's our African American population. About 16.5 hold a bachelor's degree or higher. The middle is at 58%. That's our Asian population that hold a bachelor's degree or higher. The fourth is at 33%. That's our white residents. And so we really continue to use community efforts, the community leaders in 15K and other initiatives to really focus on this and not allow the work of the entire community to miss the opportunity with some of that persistent gap. So the second deep driver looks at growing 21st century jobs. This calls for increasing and has traditionally looked at the proportion of residents engaged in technical and professional occupations with the underlying goal of raising incomes, ultimately higher wages, more jobs, the kind of thing we're all paying attention to and looking at across the community. But implicit in that is providing skills and knowledge training for workers in lower wage occupations and retaining, growing, and attracting employers that provide these professional and technical jobs. While we have made progress, the red bar again in the middle, red is where we were in 1990 as compared to our peer cities in the blue bars. In 1990, the green that adds onto that is in 2000, 2010 is the yellow. So we are making progress in professional and technical jobs. What we're finding is that it hasn't delivered a meaningful increase in wage growth or new jobs. And so this chart really looks at the real wage growth between 1980 and 2010. Our employment, our wages really only grew only 18%. We're 14th, second from the bottom. During that same period, some of our competitors like Raleigh and Charlotte grew real wages by nearly 50%. So how do we pay attention to that? How do we remain behind in pure jobs growth? We're looking at our employment grew about 38% during that same period, ranking us 11th among 15 peer cities. Ultimately, at the Greater Louisville Project, we have concluded that measuring how Louisville achieves progress on this front will require new metrics. An innovation economy will drive both job and wage growth and calls for new benchmarks in this deep driver. So I look forward to sharing with you future Greater Louisville Project reports. We'll consider new indicators such as STEM jobs, science, technology, engineering, and math, as opposed to professional and technical. Or will we look at small business creation or new patents? How do we measure our progress in a new, growing, more global, innovative economy? And I think some of the things that we're looking forward to help to inform that are around the planned spring report of the Bluegrass Economic Advancement Movement, BEAM, that's led by Mayor Greg Fisher and Mayor Jim Gray. And at the same time, we're working with local leaders from across sectors. We're working with the mayor's office and Ted Smith. We're working with Eileen Pickett and her team at GLI and Michael Gritton and his team at Kentuckiana Works to really think about how do we address this changing economy together. So the last steep driver, and I think one of the most fun, the quality of place. This calls for maintaining Louisville's compactness and livability. But ultimately, livability and quality of place can mean different things to a lot of people. So over time, the Greater Louisville Project has looked at indicators in public safety, green space and parklands, affordable housing, environmental issues. Implicit in the goal is a continued focus on revitalization of the downtown core and reinvestment in the core county of Louisville, all driving economic forces in our region. So this year's report looked at our ability to retain and attract those vibrant, talented young people and the regional distribution of population. So to start with young people, the data presents that Louisville was generally reversing a 20-year trend of losing young people, whether they hold degrees or not. During that time, we added 7,200 young adults. This placed us in the top half among our peers, an important fact, especially when you consider that during the same period, 4 of our peer cities actually lost population among this important age group. You may have noticed that in the most recent ACS study, the number of young adults showed a decrease. This is a red flag, and we'll need to keep an eye on these numbers to ensure that we don't lose the momentum that we created between 2000 and 2010. And does the hint that we have sluggish wage and growth poses the question, do we have the jobs here to keep those talented young people? But ultimately, we know that permanently reversing the brain drain would represent a profound impact on our quality of life and economic viability. So we will continue carefully measuring how we are attracting and retaining college-educated young people here. National studies and research partners consistently remind us that a competitive city requires a high concentration of jobs and people based in the urban core. On that front, it seems that we are losing ground. You'll see this graphic here, and it's on your report. It's probably easier to read in front of you. The red graphic is actually Jefferson County, and while Louisville's population in the red grew 7% over the last decade, you'll see that our surrounding counties grew at a faster rate. Oldham grew by 31%, Bullock County by 20%, and the others. The city lost ground in its share of the region's 1.2 million population and their jobs. So while we are a part of the regional economy and growth among our neighbors is important, we must keep attention on growth within Louisville. Job and population growth in the core county must remain strong. We must continue to support Louisville as the economic driver for the entire region and ultimately for the state. So what's next? In this next year, the Policy Board has committed to exploring health in our community and how health affects our progress towards our goal of becoming a more competitive city. Health affects all three deep drivers of change: the educational success of our students, the productivity and vitality of our workforce, the very fabric of our quality of life. So we've begun to look at the research and invite our various institutions and agencies, leaders working in health, to explore the opportunity of how the Greater Louisville Project might set new indicators around health in the future. So we are working with an advisory group in health, including some Rotarians, Dr. Donna Hargan's leadership team at JCPS, Dr. LaQuandra Nesbitt and her team at the city's Public Health and Wellness Department, Leland, I saw Leland when I walked in, with Massey from the Greater Louisville Medical Society, and many others, leaders from corporate and nonprofit sectors in this area. And we expect and look forward to releasing this special report on health this summer. So we started with a few words from Bill Gates, and I'd like to conclude with a final quote from him. He says, "I've been struck again and again by how important measurement is to improving the human condition. You can achieve amazing progress if you set a clear goal and find a measure that will drive progress toward that goal." Wise words for all parts of our lives, including our work together as community leaders. This community can together set a clear agenda that will advance us as a more competitive city. And through honestly and aggressively measuring ourselves against our peer cities, we can make dramatic and strategic advances toward long-term progress. Not just in more college degrees or in higher wage jobs, but ultimately in a better quality of life for all Louisvillians. So with that, I conclude. I thank you for your time. I hope that the work of the Greater Louisville Project will continue to encourage you to think about the greatest challenges and opportunities in our community. What big, audacious goals could we set for a more vibrant and competitive city? I encourage you to take and to use the research and data that the Greater Louisville Project presents and to use it to inform the policies and programs in your leadership roles across the community. So I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have for me, but I invite your feedback as well. If we have time, I'd like to hear, what do you believe are the most strategic challenges or opportunities in our community?